Okay, we're live.
Your yeah, your laboratory kind of looks like the set of an X-Files spinoff, and you're one of the
Mm.
guys who thinks he's talking to aliens.
So I need to like smoke a cigarette and start talking about chupacabras and I don't
Do y'all subscribe to Kevin Linaw's email list, his newsletter?
know. I do not. I know who he is.
Yeah, Kevin Linaw is, I mean, at least he was a member of the closure community early on. He,
He
I
drifts
think,
around.
yeah, I think he's still involved. But when COVID hit, he moved to Taiwan, thinking like, oh, this is a great time to be in someplace safe where they know how to take care of the, virus. And he was going to do some hardware hacking, but it turns out that he's finding buying equipment kind of difficult because they don't have Amazon. And so he just has this story of like trying to buy an oscilloscope, something you could just buy off the shelf
Oh
for
yeah.
$600, and it
Yeah, I saw
taking like going to all these companies and negotiating with them that they would sell it to him for $1,200.
that.
So anyway, thought that was a cool story. Should check out his newsletter. I did not put it in
Yeah.
the show notes.
But on the other hand, I mean, the thrill of the hunt, right? The spirit of adventure.
Right. Something that he could have just ordered in 10 minutes on Amazon, have it delivered to his door. Whoa, I hear a lot of people joining in. Well, I guess we should get started. Hello, welcome to Apropos Live. If you're watching this on YouTube, this was live back when we did it sometime in the past. And if you want to join in live, you got to come on the Discord server. So the link will be in the show notes for how to see us live. But if you're here live with us, awesome. Jump in the live show chat channel and you'll be able to ask us questions and stuff. Today, we've got 3 panelists. We've got Mia.
Hello.
Mike.
Howdy.
And I'm Eric. And we have a few topics for today.
I was gonna say before we get into that, I think all the cool kids are doing Discord these days. And the reason I know is I at work we started using Discord and I had it on my mobile phone and it made the little doo-doo sound. And my 16-year-old daughter goes, Discord?
Oh, whoa.
So it's like she's more in tune with what's going on in the world than me.
For sure.
So yeah, I'm like, I'm turning into the old curmudgeon.
Uh-huh. Like, I remember IRC.
I don't know.
That's what I used.
Exactly.
There was nothing wrong with it.
I tried to explain IRC to my sister. She's 12 years younger than me. And she's like, why? So you couldn't set a picture? You couldn't have an avatar?
No,
Oh,
and
yeah,
if
and
you weren't logged in, you just missed the chat. Like, it just didn't.
You just miss
You
everything.
missed it. It's all live.
IRC also was like, you typically would do it back in the day in a terminal window, right?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't even an app, you know. You would use the protocol directly from a terminal.
It's still fun to
yeah.
do when you're at like a conference or something. You know, you have an IRC set up that you're just
Or that.
yeah, you just pop in. All your
IRC.
buddies.
Yeah.
I had a lot of friends who were on it all the time, and they learned quite a lot from it. It's if you are good at it, it can be better than documentation, better than a website listing all the docs, because you could just ask exactly the question that you have. But I would install it and start, and like the next day I'd forget to even open it and not get into it. So I'm just not social online.
I was using IRC in like 1994. 95, somewhere around there, before the web existed. Like, it was like mind blowing back then, to be honest. It was like, man, we're actually talking to people in real time around the world. And, yeah, it was
Awesome.
crazy. It was
Yeah,
before ICQ and all those things.
I was on a Pokemon IRC to trade Pokemon with people around the world.
Wow. That's actually cool.
No,
It's
it isn't.
after my time. Pokemon. Okay, we have some topics.
sorry,
Let's get into closure. We don't have to reminisce about the good old days.
Old school
Hey,
technology.
that is a good IRC joke, though. Nia Sade says the old joke is instead of asking for help with X in IRC, you say X sucks because I can't do Y, and then everyone will want to disprove you. I think that still works on Stack Overflow, actually.
Good to know. All right, so our first topic is that Chris Oakman is doing a ClojureScript workshop, and I think it's 10 weeks long, and no, not that long. I'm gonna click on it right now. Oops. Well, that didn't work. Sorry, I gotta change the show notes so I can see it. It's not 10 weeks long. It's 10 hours per week, and it's like live. He's teaching you live. It's not a video course that you just download and watch. And so I think that this is really cool for the Clojure and ClojureScript community. He's a good teacher. He's got a lot of experience, and I think I'm just happy to see this kind of thing happening. 3 months long. There you go. 3 months long, 10 hours per week, and $2,600 total. So Chris has taught a lot of JavaScript at boot camps. So if you really want something to like kickstart your ClojureScript, I think it's designed for people who already know JavaScript who want to like get to the next level in a different language. Go for it. I think it's cool.
And Chris
This is
Oakman,
exciting.
Really nice.
Like, I see a lot of, like, learn Python in 3 months, or, there's all kinds of Java and Python and even Ruby courses on Udemy or whatever. It's really, there's not a lot for Clojure. This is really exciting.
The fact that it's live is probably pretty cool, too, because invariably you're trying to learn something new and you have gaps in your knowledge and you're like, what does this little part mean? And you can straighten out right there on the spot what you were missing. And
right. And the cohort, everyone learning at the same time, like you can help each other. I think it's cool. I want to do something like this eventually when I feel like I can commit 3 months, 10 hours a week. I don't know if I could commit that right now. But not follow the course, but like teach the course. I think it's a cool model. Yeah.
Kind of brings me back to the boot camp days. Like that's what you do in boot camp. Yeah, I mean, we were there for 12 hours a day sometimes. And when you've got your cohort, then you're all just studying and working together.
And does the cohort help with the energy, like the motivation to keep going that hard?
Oh yeah, well, and you're in you're a little competitive too. Okay. So for me, the competition with my cohort was like there were like 4 of us who were just constantly trying to outdo each other, and all of us ended up with a lot of extra skills by the time we got out of there, just because like we were teaching each other, but we were also like trying to beat each other, and that's exciting. You don't get that if it's not live. Yeah,
and I mean also like from my own perspective as a course creator, it's always hard to know if you're missing something, like, if I just put another minute about talking about this other thing, if you have someone like, your students asking right then and there for what they need, it's a lot easier to make it real.
And you're like, oh yeah, I didn't explain that part yet. Here's the gap.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I just signed up for one of these for a pen and ink drawing.
Okay.
Cool. there's a future in these kind of totally remote boot camps for anything you can think of,
Yeah. I agree.
especially because we're all trapped in our houses.
We're all trapped. I mean, people have more disposable income than ever. And I don't know, the convenience of doing it at home instead of like enrolling in night school or something seems better.
Of course, what it means is, the people who can take it are the people who have the luxury of a computer that works in an open office,
That's
right? Which I think I think SANS, which is a network security kind of course provider, they are giving out tools. Like when you take their course, they give you like an iPad mini or something to work with.
Oh, wow.
Which is, what they're doing in the public schools to try and get it. So, because all the kids, like all their stuff is online now. So the schools give them
Right.
all Chromebooks so they can follow along.
It would be really cool if you could teach closure with Chromebooks. You had some
Yeah.
kind of computer in the cloud that did the heavy lifting, and you just telnetted in or SSH'd into it or something. That would be cool.
That would be really cool. Yeah. And then you could do one of these courses where you sign up and you get a Chromebook.
Right. Yeah,
It makes it so
exactly.
much more accessible.
Yep. Yep. Now it's making me think. How could you do that?
And that's,
Yep.
that's what I liked about Replete when you first started it, is I was like, oh, I can put this on my phone
Right.
and then I can play with this while I'm bored.
Yeah, I too would go for walks back when I used to go to work. And I'd be walking, like I'd take like a lunchtime walk and I'd be thinking about something. I'm like, I wonder, what does this function do? Or what, like you're thinking about this language you're learning, and it's cool to have it on your phone. You could just like try it, just answer those short little questions,
Yeah. What do you have back there? I'm fixated on it.
What
I
what
gotta
specifically
know.
are you referring to?
Well, there's a blue
Well,
thing with like, is that an antenna sticking out
it
on the
looks like a
side?
weird pizza cutter.
Yeah. This is
Oh,
is
there's two. Oh,
so
what
this
is
Cooler
this?
than I thought.
yeah, this is an antenna.
Okay.
And it's shaped the way it is so that it can pick up various frequencies. If you imagine an antenna, it spreads out to get the longer bandwidth or the longer wavelengths, and then so that's what that is. Yeah,
Wait, you
it's called a biconical antenna. Yeah,
you are the guy who thinks he's talking to aliens. That is you.
I am an alien. No, yeah, I can hear signals coming in from strange places. Yeah.
Wait, so what are you doing with it?
So I've been working on key fobs at work and making sure that they broadcast. I'll take a key fob for a car and put it into a device, and I want to pick up the signal on the antenna. And also, from the bigger picture, if you're going to make something electronic, you want to make sure that it's not causing interference to things around it, and you can pick up those kind of signals on an antenna like that as well. Yeah.
And you have 3 very small microwave ovens.
Yes. So I can make pizzas whenever I want.
Smaller and smaller pizzas each time.
Yeah. So yeah. So I can speak to aliens whenever I want. And, yeah. But yeah,
Wow.
I'm half programmer, computer programmer. I have like the desk that I face this way, and then I turn around and I do electronic stuff, and I spin back and forth all day long.
Do you ever do like
And is
one
all
hand
your
on
hardware
this
stuff
desk?
in Clojure?
Is my stuff in? Well, so at the bottom, when you're dealing with some of these small microcontrollers, I have to write stuff in C, which is a pain, or Rust, I guess. I haven't learned that yet, but yeah. Because these microcontrollers, truth be told, you can get Clojure script to run on them, but it's when you're talking about really small devices with very little memory, that's the main thing you kind of need. I would say it's not so much CPU power to run Clojure script or Clojure on these things; it's the RAM that you need to be able to run a language like that.
Have you looked at one of the small Lisps besides Clojure?
I haven't. No.
Like an embedded Lisp.
Yeah, I agree. What you could probably compile one of those things down to like native code, or maybe translate it into C first and then compile that.
Yeah, I mean, because you get rid of the mutability, and you just have like very little memory allocations. You could do quite a lot.
Yeah. So the dream is that WebAssembly will add garbage collection, right, one day, and then once that happens, if they haven't already done that,
That seems like the opposite of what they want to do.
Well,
they're rebuilding the JavaScript VM in WebAssembly.
Yeah. So the trick is, if we want to run things like Lisps, you kind of benefit from having garbage collection. Right?
Yeah.
I guess you could do it without it, right? I hadn't thought about it that deeply.
Well, I think that if you look at some of the features of Lisp, like so you have the easy syntax, you have macros, and so if you think of it as like a compiler target, let's call it, with a REPL, so it's got an interpreter, but it compiles down to pretty close to C level. So you can basically write the language you need in Lisp, and it compiles down to good code. And you have, everything's mutable, and you can just grab arrays of memory that you need and mutate them at low level. But you still got like recursion, and first class functions. Like it could be, I don't know. It seems like you've got a lot of the good stuff that you'd miss from something like C.
I bet you could do a Lisp without garbage collection if you just used reference counting instead. That's how, like, if you ever program in Objective C, it's if you squint and you think, it does end up feeling a lot like Java, in the sense that you're not worried about memory management so much. At least the Objective-C, when they added ARC, automatic reference counting. And Objective-C is also very, I would say very reflective, or very runtime-ish,
Yeah.
where you can send messages between things. So the reason I'm saying that is that Objective-C got by without garbage collection. You could, just use reference counting. So maybe
apparently there's a Lisp called Carp. It was just linked in live show chat.
That's right. Okay, yeah. So does that have it?
Carp has no garbage collector.
So okay.
It says automatic and deterministic memory management, no garbage collector or VM. Straightforward integration with existing C code.
Well, that's important.
Okay, that's what I'm going to look at then. That would be probably maybe good for these little embedded targets, where you don't want to have a garbage collector or just native stuff on a desktop. Yeah.
I have a friend who was into Lisp on little embedded machines, because you can get some for like $1. It's like a computer that you just hook up a USB cord to, and you can talk to it, and it doesn't have much memory, so you can't run a big thing. But all these embedded things you can. There's like Pico Lisp and E-Scheme or something.
Yeah. I've always wanted to have like Clojure or ClojureScript compiled to native code. Just take what we have. Like Scala went through this recently. There's a Scala native now.
There is.
And of course we have like Graal VM, Graal, right? You can get to native that way. But it'd be interesting if there was a compiler that compiled from Clojure or ClojureScript or some dialect, right, straight to machine code, and just did all that. Of course, it's like, who's going to build such a compiler, right?
Yeah, I started one that was like, basically I started with protocols, and my idea was to take ClojureScript and try and like use as much of that as possible, because ClojureScript is mostly built in ClojureScript, right? So there's just a little bootstrapping that's done in JavaScript that like sets up the protocol tables, something, it's something simple like that.
Yeah, if you were going to do a project like that, you probably should start with a ClojureScript compiler. It's cleaner and it's all based on itself.
Yeah, and so I was just gonna like see how to do that in C.
Mm.
And the cool thing is, if it's a compiled language, you can assume a closed world, like there's no REPL, and so you're not going to add new stuff to the protocols. So everything could just be array lookups, right? You could just statically compile it into, this is protocol implementation number 3, and you just look it up in an array, and it's pretty fast.
Mm-hmm.
That was my idea. It's all dynamically dispatched, but it's done, with just an array lookup.
I think if I remember right, I think that's what ClojureScript does do for some of the protocols.
Oh, really?
There's this thing called fast path dispatch, where it takes some of the core protocols that are important, like I counted or whatever. And I think if I remember right, it puts them into like slots in an array, so it can just zip right to them.
So like the core types and the core protocols get a fast path.
There is something in there. It's been a few years since I've looked at that, but yeah. What you just said reminded me of that.
Oh, that's cool.
Now, what's the trade-offs for, I guess, like where would the cutoff be for, so the cutoff is, it sounds like, the core protocols and things that are the most important to do that with. But
well, that's a good question, because C doesn't have many types. It's not like JavaScript. I didn't get that far, because the thing is, it was going to compile to C, and then you just send it to a C compiler. And one of the problems with C is it doesn't have closures. You can't refer to the scope of a variable, scope of a function, where it's defined. All functions are defined at the global level. So you have to work around that, and then you start getting into like, how do you store the state, the environment it's in, and like figure out when it's going to need to be garbage collected, because that could just leak. Like every time you create a closure, it never gets deallocated. So I stopped. I was like, if it's gonna need a garbage collector, there's, that's too much for me right now. Okay, wow, we started with a course on ClojureScript and we got here. That's pretty good. Next up on our topics, Jordan Miller has been producing some videos explaining Clojure and ClojureScript. In the show notes, there's one called WTF is ClojureScript Interrobang.
Mike, if you haven't watched these, you should check them out.
Yeah, Mike suggested this. You want to explain why you liked it?
Well, it's just, she has like this neat alter ego. I guess she's like, if you think of Alex Miller reminds me of myself. This is Jordan Miller. It was like complete flip top, just very delightful antics and ways of explaining things that it's just very entertaining. I think it's just kind of a breath of fresh air, just a different way of like trying to teach the subject and talk about things, and I like it.
She's definitely enthusiastic, and that is awesome.
Yeah.
We need people like that. I'm too boring myself.
I know. I feel like I'm just like, man, a straight-laced old curmudgeon,
Yeah.
Loosen up a little bit.
And it's sort of like, and I don't know why if it feels less like this to me, because I've just been working in it for so long now, but it feels like Clojure and ClojureScript used to be more of an enthusiast community. And it still is the thing that you, like, for a lot of people, it's the thing that you do when you're not doing your job. But I think that the scope has kind of narrowed a little bit to mostly people who now do it for their jobs.
Huh, interesting.
So we are kind of missing.
It's a grown-up language now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. People are too busy making money with it now.
Right.
But it used to be a hobby language. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
What are the hobbyists all doing now? Rust?
Oh, yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
question.
maybe.
What's the new hot language? Yeah.
Is it because Russ got the cute little crab? Like, should we
Haha, we need a mascot.
we need an animal.
I mean, Rust. So, Rust is a cool language, and I like it. I don't think that people have the problem that it's trying to solve, though. Like, I look at the list of, here are the problems that we're addressing, and it's the same list that Java addressed. We need, no more seg faults and no more, C is too unsafe, and it's all the same problems, and the only thing is that it's because of the types, the pretty cool type system, they can compile it all down and not have a big runtime.
Is that it's the flavor of like the static nature of all of it, where it's like the borrow checking or whatever. Like you basically have this mammoth type checking compiler that like proves that your code won't segfault. Is that the idea? And you can do as much at compile time as you can to statically come down to like.
That's right. That's right. That they've found the model that they can prove statically. The what are the concepts and how do they, logically. How can you logically deduce things with them, right? So they've created a little logic that can tell when something goes out of scope, or when two things can both access something at the same time and they shouldn't. Like, there's all sorts of cool things in there. But I mean, do people really have this problem? That's my question. It's
when I'm programming in C, I'm like, maybe I could program in Rust.
Right. So C programmers, I see why they might want to switch over, because they're
like if you're targeting something that can only really run native C code.
Right.
I guess is Rust sort of positioned in the niche relative to C where Clojure was to Java when it was released? Where it's like if you're doing this if you're doing this in Java, you could be doing it in Clojure and having a nicer time. Like if you're doing this in C, you could be doing it in Rust and be happier.
Yeah.
But how many people are really working in C?
That's right. That's my question. Like, there's a lot of C++ programmers. There's a lot of
That's
C
why
programmers.
I think that we need an animal.
The crab.
Yeah.
It's not the features, it's the crab.
We need like the squid or something.
Right. It's like Go has that little, is it a mole or something?
A gopher.
Oh, yeah.
It's a gopher, right? It's a gopher.
Yeah, that was dumb. It's a gopher. That's why it's popular.
Oh, okay. I didn't know this.
We need an animal. Even Python has a snake.
We need an animal that can be represented by an emoji.
To Chris Oakman about it. He made the Clojure script.
I like the squid.
Squid?
Right? It's cute.
Yeah.
Cuttlefish,
and it's got its tentacles and everything. There's the Clojure.
And those are
Clojure
kind of
script,
parenthesis shaped. I guess the question is...
The logo draws itself.
Is it recursive?
It's a squid with like
it's about a circular logo.
Oh. There's a suggestion in the chat, which is...
Oh, so cute.
I'm going to pull this over here just so y'all can see it on the video. Yeah. Look at that. Look at that cute Cthulhu. That's cute.
Cthulhu. But how do you represent that with an emoji?
There's no Cthulhu emoji? Seems like one of the first ones the Unicode committee would be on. Like... We got smiley face, frowny face, and Cthulhu. Oh, there's a squid and there's a bat. Oh, that's interesting. Squid times bat equals Cthulhu.
Squid. I vote squid.
Actually, someone was asking if Clojure had a mascot. Okay. We're getting way off topic over here.
Are we, or is it important?
Are we going to solve the mascot issue right now?
We're going to... I don't know if we're going to solve it, but I think we can raise it.
Okay, it is important. We've got a confirmation from the chat. It is important, so we can keep going.
There we go. There's a great post on Clojure, first about Clojure being an octopus. Is there an octopus emoji as well as a squid emoji? There is.
There's a squid and an octopus.
Maybe we should be an octopus.
Huh. Octopus is cool. I like it. I like the because the tentacles and this intelligence, like they all have a lot of symbolism that could work with the language. Yeah, many hosts. That's right. Like
they're also, the octopus is the IC of animals.
The integrated circuit?
No, the individual contributor.
Oh.
Right? They're just chilling, like solving puzzles, trying to feed themselves.
Fitting through small holes.
As one does.
I'm in your REPL, like, I don't know. I think that there's something to this, and someone should draw one and get on this, and we'll share it on the next
community
issue, the next episode. Anyway, back to Rust. I think an octopus could crush a crab, and so
there's definitely a video somewhere of a crab fighting an octopus. We can see who wins.
I think Rust is really cool. I have heard a lot of things on both sides in terms of like, it's really awesome to be able to compile directly down to very fast code. And then the other side is it's too much work to make things compile. Like, yes, you know for sure that things are going to work, in terms of like not leaking memory and stuff. But doing that work when in C you would just like do some pointer dereferencing, and do it unsafely. But yeah,
maybe Rust gets in your way a little bit at times because
I've heard both,
yeah.
and it depends on the balance that you're trying to strike. And sometimes safety is like paramount, and so you want a language that makes it hard to be unsafe. And then sometimes you're just trying to try something out, and you don't want to have to prove that it's going to work.
I'm still stuck on Scala having a native.
Yeah. Does it have its own runtime? Like, does it have its own garbage collector and stuff?
So I'm looking at Scala native right now. An optimizing ahead of time compiler and lightweight managed runtime designed specifically for Scala.
And is the goal to completely duplicate all of the, I want to call them mismatches between the Scala system and the Java system?
It seems like the goal is actually to interop with C.
Okay. So, yeah. People talk about how the Java ecosystem of libraries is one of the huge advantages of Clojure, and it is. It's definitely one of the big ones. But C has a huge library ecosystem too. So, when I was doing Haskell, if you needed something, you could just call into C. It wasn't, if there wasn't a wrapper already, it was a little inconvenient. You had to like write the wrapper, but everything's in C. Everything's already there.
I guess what would the challenges of putting together a Clojure native be?
I think solving the garbage collection issue.
Yeah.
If you're going to try to maintain the semantics of Clojure and not, you could say like it's Clojure-y, Clojure-esque, and say we're trying to get the control that you can do with Clojure, but not have the immutability, let's say.
Well, because, when I think about it, like Clojure feels, which it shouldn't feel inseparable from the JVM, because Clojure script obviously is not part of the JVM at all. But in my head, Clojure feels inseparable from the JVM.
Mia, come
but
on.
So does Scala.
Yeah.
There's a Scala script or whatever. It's the same.
Scala.js. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Scala.js.
Yeah. That
yeah.
was actually, an existential question when ClojureScript came out. It was like people were, I don't know if upset was the word, but confused when they were like, but where's my string library? And it's like, well, there's no string library in JavaScript, so you don't have one. Like if you're just calling out to the string class in Java and now there's no string class, you got to do it differently. And other things that the JVM provided, JavaScript runtime didn't. What's that?
So I wasn't involved when ClojureScript came out, but that's what you remember is like a lot of angst over like the runtime support, I guess, of the host.
Yeah, and they were existential questions like, what is Clojure? And I think that having the two runtimes really kind of refined what it was. It was like you have to have host interop, you have to have closures and stuff like that, but then you have the data structures, those are a must, and the closures have to have like immutable arguments and immutable local variables, let bound variables, and like that was it. Is sort of like yeah, and then protocols, but sort of like if you can get them, it's almost like not necessary. It's just like a convenient way to implement it. So I think if you looked at it again and said, well, what do we have on native? Like what would we need to still be able to call it Clojure? I think you could squint again and say like, what is it here that we're trying to do? What are we trying to solve by going native? And if it is memory efficiency, you might say like, well, we're just making a version of Clojure that doesn't trash the memory as much as the JVM version, because we don't have a garbage collector, and maybe you get a little bit more control over allocations and deallocations and stuff.
Yeah, and maybe you could have that model that ClojureScript has where it's like the dev mode where you have the REPL and all that kind of stuff, and then the compiled mode where you just optimize everything.
That would be cool.
Yeah, that's cool. So then you still get the ergonomics of working in Clojure, but
yeah. I think the reference counting is cool too. Like, if you could implement the automatic reference counting, which shouldn't be that hard because you kind of have a total view of all the let bound variables, all the defs. You should be able to know every location where something is referenced. Right, that was one of the challenges with Objective-C, was like it started off as like a set of C macros, right? C compiler macros, and so you just had regular C variables, whereas in Clojure you have a complete knowledge of every reference. Huh. Okay. Not going to solve that one today, but it's an interesting idea.
We've just ideas guide to very important things.
Yes. And if you're
Mascot?
out there and you're the person who's going to write Clojure native, you're welcome. Okay.
And when you do write Clojure native, include an octopus emoji somewhere. Just
yeah, you get to
get that kicked off.
You get to choose the logo when it happens. Right. So the last topic was also Mike's. It's something about the inst. Um, I don't
Yeah, I
remember what
just thought it
those are
was
called.
interesting. If we were
Tag
wanting to talk
literal.
about something specifically, I can show you what I was working on, and we could get metaphysical or whatever. We could talk about what is inst really. Like you're
I
saying,
would
what is
love
what?
to.
Yeah.
We actually, I ran into an inst thing
Oh
a
yeah,
couple weeks ago at work,
I
and
like inst.
yeah.
Let me see if I can share my REPL or my screen, my terminal.
Yeah.
I could figure out how to do this. Let me share my
Rebel,
screen.
rebel,
Let's
rebel.
see. Applications. This one here.
And we
Sorry.
are without our rebel whisperer. Uh,
Yeah.
everyone say get
Ray's
well
not
soon
feeling
to
too good
Ray.
right now. Yeah. So I'm in a closure script REPL, and basically to start this off, there was a bug that. So if you do inst 1500.
Can we see it?
Okay, so I am sharing right now, and it is in one of the windows in Discord. So I don't know if I don't know what to do on y'all's end to make it show up. Do you
Uh,
see?
Hold on. I don't see it. You're
I don't
sharing?
see it either.
Okay, I see
I
it in
see
my.
it. Oh, I see it.
Did you
I've
find
got
it?
it. Yeah. So if you go to show non-video participants,
Oh, okay.
Okay,
mfikes as a computer shows up, and we can
I am a
see.
computer. What are they talking about?
Well, now you're several computers.
Oh, I
Okay.
see. Watch stream. There we go.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Yeah, so then you can like have it go into your recording mode. Yeah.
Yes, it is now
So there was a
All
recording.
bug.
right.
So there's a bug where if you do insta 1500, you get that. And I'll do CLJ.
Wait, and what? Why is that a bug?
It's
Because
hard to see, but if I do it in closure, you'll see. Okay.
because it's
So the bug is right there.
right. It's a 10. So
Oh.
it's the 10th of January instead of the 1st of January.
Yeah. And this has to do with there's the flip over between the Julian calendar and the Gregorian calendar.
I remember that.
Okay, you remember that? Were you around then? Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
You were like, were you a proponent or
It's on
against
the
it?
news.
It helped. It helped with like
I was
the
pro.
leap
I was
year.
pro Gregorian.
You wanted the leap years and all that. Yeah.
I'm
So
for science. I like science, accuracy.
yeah.
My calendar.
We should use the French Republic calendar.
Ooh, I like the decimal calendar. The 10 months, 10. Come on, let's.
Okay.
Let's just joke.
All right.
So,
All right.
well,
At
at the root of this is there's a bug where you have to talk about what is this string? What calendaring system is it in? And if you look up the spec for Eden for Inst, I think it refers to some RFC. But that defines like the date format, whatnot, with that T in the middle and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But the problem is if you say, okay, that string is in a hybrid Julian Gregorian calendar, you'll interpret those strings in that calendaring system, and you'll print them in that calendaring system as well. Alternatively, you could define it to be in what's called the proleptic Gregorian calendar, which is kind of like, it's a simpler one where you could say, the Gregorian calendar as we know it is now, that we all use every day, just extend it backwards and ignore the fact that the transition ever occurred.
Mm-hmm.
And that's simpler because there's like
You can do date math. You can say like today
basically
minus 600, and it's still 600 years, and it still works.
Yeah, so that calendar is used in JavaScript. If you basically, well, let me go back into closure, so everyone can still see my terminal. If we do this insta 1500 and we do inst ms, which gives you the milliseconds for that time, because that's what an inst really is to me. It's the number of milliseconds since this epoch, right?
Mm-hmm.
Since 1970, right?
Right.
That's what it's really. It's a instant in time, and it's basically a number of milliseconds relative to this point in time that occurred in the universe.
That's a very Unixy.
Yeah. But that's what an inst is. Like it's devoid of human things, like time zones and stuff
calendar.
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you let me fire up Node. So if you look in Node, you'll get a different timestamp for that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's because Node is it's interpreting that string in the proleptic Gregorian calendar, the simpler one. So what I want to say is JavaScript uses the proleptic Gregorian calendar for its date class. And it turns out that if you
And Java uses.
well, Java can use either. Java has this new instant class
Right.
in the new time stuff. It uses this proleptic Gregorian calendar.
But
Um,
inst by default gets parsed into
so
a
yeah, so
Java
when
util date.
Java, it gets parsed into that, and when it does that, the parsing machinery uses this Gregorian calendar that has a switchover.
Huh.
So I don't know what it's really supposed to be honest. If you look at the Eden spec, it doesn't say. But I guess you could be like a rules lawyer and you could go dig and you could say like, what is this really? You could go look up the related RFC spec, which is
Right.
related on some other spec. And so there's probably an answer. Maybe Alex Miller has to come down and say we've consulted and it's this, and and that would be useful if it was either decided to be like open ended and hosty, like you could say
Right.
it's different, or you could say no, we want it to be the same thing everywhere because we want it to be unambiguous in terms of Eden, what this means.
Right. So that's really that's I think the hosty sounds the most Eden to me.
Mhm.
That all the other all the language I've read about Eden is like, oh, it's up to your platform
Yeah.
that parses this to decide how to represent these in a way that makes sense for that platform. It's probably though that like the ruling would be if you this is my guess of what they would rule. If you care that much, don't pass in just the year. Put the whole string.
No, it's
Does it-
not it's not even that. I'm sorry.
It's not
let me
that?
further clarify. Yeah. Sorry, maybe my example was misleading. I'm going to go back into
Okay.
ClojureScript. So it's not that it's a. I'm sorry, I skipped a step. So I was using the shorthand for 1500,
Right.
which you can do according to the RFCs or whatever. But if I
Right.
take the whole thing, let me get this correct one that has a 01 right there, right? So I'm parsing this. You still get the 10.
Oh wow.
Ah.
Well,
You got
that's
me now?
bad.
Oh,
So
It's
now
a bug. Yeah.
wait, and so
yeah.
so like you can't even read back in what you just printed out. So
Right. Yeah.
can
yeah,
you?
right.
What if you read? What if you do that? What if you read that one back in?
Yeah. Yeah.
What does that do?
Will that move forward a little more?
19. Oh man. Okay, this is a real bug.
Oof. The
Yeah.
bug
Now
bug.
you're with me.
reading.
Now you're with me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, bug.
Now if you go and it turns out that if you use the Eden Reader in ClojureScript, you get the right answer. In a sense that what is right here, but I'll show you what I mean.
I mean, I think that usually right is whatever Clojure does, right?
Yeah. Agree with that.
This is really juicy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm glad you're getting into it. I thought this would be like the kind of dry, commercial topic that's like, whatever. But it's like, it's at the core of what we all use every day, right? Like, what is inst? What does
Right.
this
Yeah,
string
and this
really
is
mean?
this
you
is a bug.
Yeah, it's
Like,
a
I'm
bug.
surprised this doesn't bite more people.
Right. I
Well,
mean, all the
it only- okay, so to be
records
clear,
that I
this only-
keep from back in that time.
I know. This
1500s.
only happens if you were like a proponent back then and you were fighting the good fight.
No,
and you
but you
gave up
can't
and you
even
went
read
to-
it back in. That's a bug. Like that
Yeah.
should be
I guess-
a property based test. It's like generating random insts and seeing.
See,
if you
that's
can
what
read
I'm
it back in.
thinking. That's where I'm
Okay,
thinking
so-
you'd see it.
Like I don't care.
So,
You could interpret it how you want on the different platform, but if you can't even print it out on on that platform and read it back in on the same platform, that's bad.
Yeah, I'm thinking you're doing property-based testing. Like, I would think that you would run into this.
Okay, what am I doing wrong here? Let's see. Oh, I got to require Eden again because I stopped my REPL. So I'm basically trying to show you that if you read it. Okay,
Oh.
so the Eden Reader is cool. So
Yeah.
if you have backup, like why is this? Why is it so? why can you read this enclosure script correctly?
Because the Eden namespace does it right. It's the REPL reader, the read string.
Yeah.
So if you type,
if I go into a self-hosted REPL instead,
okay,
put in this string, you get back the right thing. And that's because the self-hosted REPL is using basically effectively the Clojure Eden reader. It's at its core, the bug here is that in Clojure script, JVM Clojure script is using Clojure to parse this date that you type in. So if I go back to the bug is pretty simple. It's annoying, but if you go into here,
like read string on it.
Yeah. So if I take this string, and I put it into the JVM based Clojure script REPL, to parse that, it's going to use, this is basically, I'm running a Clojure program right now.
Right.
It uses Clojure to parse that.
It's calling read.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And if you were to do it in verbose mode, what you would see, the Clojure script compiler takes this literal, turns it into a number, and then passes that number to the JavaScript date thing, right, thereby introducing a mismatch between the two calendaring systems. There is a fix that I put into Clojure script that basically uses it basically parses it using the Java inst stuff, the inst machinery.
Huh.
So it basically causes it to all be proleptic Gregorian. And if this holds water, if this all pans out, then this means that Clojure script uses the proleptic Gregorian calendar for everything. And it has been all along, partially, at least for readers. And Clojure has this hybrid calendar going on.
I wonder, because this is a breaking change.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Especially for us proponents of the calendar back in the day when we were fighting the good fight.
So how did you find this?
This will upset a lot of people. So Eric Assum was working on another bug. These bugs are like, they keep giving, right? There's another bug where if you're like even older than Eric and I, if you go back to the 900s, what did I do wrong there? That's weird. Oh, can you not type dates that early? Maybe you have to put a zero in front of it. I forget how people used to do it back then. Yeah. Okay, here's the bug. And if I go back into the JVM based REPL, inst has to have 4 numbers at the beginning. You can't leave off the leading 0.
That makes sense.
So the bug here was that when you do this, it strips off the leading 0, so you can't read this thing back in again. You're done. But of course, Clojure gets this right. Because Clojure's even older than all of us, right? So Clojure gets this right. So I was working on this bug, or Eric was working on this bug. Eric fixed this bug to basically make sure that it has the leading 0. But then he noticed this other thing. He noticed the extra offset of like 10 days.
Right. Because the offset is there too. It has the 905, day 5. Interesting. So can you do year 0? What does that do? 4
this
zeros.
Is another bug that I've noticed too. You can do that, but in Clojure script, so I would not recommend working this far back in time. Because this is weird. I think I need to write this bug.
My new app idea, Mike.
So let's see. Yeah, that's not good, huh? So I think we need to at least all agree that time starts at 1. No, it doesn't.
Nope, it doesn't.
And the leading zeros.
No. This might just be this. This is probably the bug that I fixed. In this version of the REPL that I'm running is prior to the bug fix.
Mike, this is making me scared.
I know you want to rely on the bedrock that is inst, right? There, this works properly. And if you try 0, you'll get like the same thing, which I don't like. So anyway, there's dragons there. Yeah.
If you read an inst in Clojure script, I'm just trying to summarize now. If you read an inst in Clojure script, so in the browser running, it's fine. If you read, meaning you can read the same thing back in.
Reader.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you're In Clojure, you can read the thing in that you have, right? You can print it and then read it back in.
Yeah, so let's go.
If you're running a Clojure script REPL, like on the JVM, meaning you're compiling. This is only a problem at the REPL, right?
So I'm basically doing things at runtime now. I'm using Eden to read a string in both dialects of Clojure script. And here's the so what you end up with is this other kind of facet to this problem, which is the string is in two different calendaring systems right now.
Right.
Alex or Rich could look at this and say, oh, this was a mistake in Clojure. We need to fix it, break and change. Or they could say, no, this is hosty. This is okay. I don't know what the outcome of that is. I mean, it's like the rules lawyering thing. You could try to go read the specs and see what it should be. But this is the way it is right now, at least. This has nothing to do with the bug I fixed. This has to do with reading strings at Eden.
Yeah.
As it is right now, there's either this fancy proleptic calendar or the hybrid Julian-Gregorian calendar, which I kind of don't like. I would prefer inst to be unambiguous, but there's other things in Eden that is ambiguous, right? Like in Clojure, you can read ratios, right?
Not inst. Get rid of the inst.
Thank you. Yeah, I've really lost my mind now. Let's see.
Now it's a string. Yeah, get rid of that.
Yeah, I gotta get rid of more. I want to read 1/3. I get back a ratio. That won't work in Clojure script, right? You'll get.
But wait, I gotta drop off.
Oh, all right, Mia. Yeah, it's 4 now.
Are ratios part of Eden?
Yeah, I think so.
I didn't know that.
Bye, team.
I know they're part of Clojure's syntax, but I didn't know they're part of Eden.
Yeah, so Eden specifies something that Clojure script can't easily do. Thank you for being on, Mia. We're almost done, too, it looks like.
Oh, wow. I just found out if I close Discord, it doesn't close the thing.
Oh, you should probably. Yeah, Discord is that way. Let me read in the 1/3 in Clojure script. You'll get a different answer there.
Right. You get a different answer, but it still reads it. I thought you were saying it can't read.
Oh, right. Oh, I'm sorry.
Because that's another thing that's just saying, like, it's hosty.
Yeah,
you know.
It's hosty. Just deal with it.
Yeah. I don't like how you can't read it back in. Right? Like, you should, if you read that back in and you sent it to Clojure, it would then make it a double or something.
So with basically. Yeah. So so you were summarizing it. It's basically
it's a problem when you're running the REPL where it's compiling each line to Clojure script, and when you type in at the REPL the inst tagged literal, the reader happens in Clojure.
Yeah.
And then the printing happens in JavaScript.
Yeah, and with the bug fix that I have in master of Clojure script, everything works out. Like you can read the string, you'll get back the same thing. That particular bug is fixed.
And your fix was to use instant in the java.time or is that what it's called now? Java.time?
Can't remember. Yeah.
Okay.
So that fixes that, so you don't have the insanity of that. Like you can type something in the REPL and get back the same thing again. And then the only thing that remains is this question of like, is inst hosty for back in the day, back in the 1500s?
Right.
Do you get two different calendar systems, or is it truly specified somewhere in the specs, somewhere that it should be one or the other?
Right. Interesting.
Yeah. And I think no one's ever noticed this because you usually don't deal with dates this far back, right?
My first user was created in 1405. How many milliseconds has it been since then? Do I need to reset their password? Yeah, it's probably not going to come up.
Yeah.
But you could be making an app about history, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you need it.
Yeah, you could be doing like some interesting data machine learning stuff over time, and you have a big database of dates, and you have instances in there. And,
Right, and you need to bucket people by decade or something, and events by decade,
yeah.
and you could
And
be
maybe you
off.
pass it between the back end and the browser, and all of a sudden the calendar becomes important. Like, what is this thing? How do you interpret this string? Which calendar is it in?
That's right.
Maybe the answer is it's Hosty. If you're in ClojureScript, it's the proleptic Gregorian calendar, and if you're in Clojure, it's the hybrid Julian Gregorian calendar. And you just have to deal with
this this is sort of like we're recalendarizing the past, right? By using this proleptic calendar. It's sort of like, you know, speaking of the 15th century, it's sort of like calling Christopher Columbus Italian, even though there was no country of Italy at that time. He's repatriated or post hoc patriated back into Italy because where he was from is now part of Italy.
I think one example of this that's along that theme is George Washington's birthday falls somewhere in this range where America had not yet adopted or switched over. So he has like the birthday that he knew when he was born. If you asked him, he would say, my birthday is this, but we all celebrate a different day now because we've moved to a different calendar. Yeah. So it's like we've rewritten his birthday to be in the calendar that we use. What a mess.
Another thing that bothers me, this is just a little pet peeve. I shouldn't even complain about it. But, some countries, they use different calendars from the main, maybe they use both so that they can communicate with, the rest of the world that uses the calendar, the Gregorian calendar. But when you ask them, they'll say, no, we use a lunar calendar. And I'm like, our calendar is lunar too. Like that's what month means. It means moon.
It does, yeah.
And it's just a different lunar calendar that's been kind of rejiggered to be more solar as well, like fit better with the solar year. But it's still lunar.
The thing I like about Inst is at least up until my world was rocked by this bug. The thing I liked about it was I thought it dispensed with all this crap. And you're like, It's unambiguous. I know what it means now. We don't have to deal with any of this. Like this is the way you talk about it instant time. And it's like, So now I have this angst over what Inst really means.
Well, and with different, I guess an Inst is like a UTC time, right?
Yeah, I guess in terms of
it has to be 1970 UTC, because with once you introduce time zones, you have this problem of like, you basically can't compare the strings anymore. You have to know, like, did they celebrate daylight savings time that year?
Right. Yeah.
And you have to have this giant database of like every daylight savings time event, because some countries don't do it every year, or like when did they start, and it's really hard.
The way I like to think about Inst is if you think of the example of like Neil Armstrong putting his foot on the moon, and that happened at a certain instant, and we can all hopefully agree that disregarding relativity and the speed of light, we can agree that occurred at a certain point in time. Right?
Did you just say disregarding physics? Is that what?
Yeah, disregarding physics. Like basically, this happened on another solar body. It wasn't even on the Earth when it happened. Right. It was an instant in time, and we can all hopefully agree of some way to express that instant in time and exchange that information with each other and ask how long ago was that, and calculate the right answer.
Yeah, to within some kind of relativity.
Yeah, exactly. The whole relativity stuff kind of messes that up.
Yeah. Once we have to start communicating with different stars and things, it might actually be significant, but I see what you're saying. Yeah. You want to just be able to like subtract what's now and what was the moon landing, and just subtract out. Yep. That would be ideal.
So we can, because that was relatively recent enough, at least in closure. But if we want to talk about 1500, then we get into this gray area. We don't know what 1500 really means.
I think there's also interesting stuff with, like, when you go far enough back, you don't know when he was born. Like, that wasn't recorded, so it's like circa 1602, and so now you're like, well, what does circa mean? Like, how much is your error band on that, and how do you subtract like a known date with a circa date? You know. You could, I guess you could say it's circa 400 years ago. Then when do you switch over to 400 or 500 years ago, or 401, circa 401 years ago?
So I feel like there might be more on this inst subject, at least in terms of like clarity. Like right now, I still have this lack of clarity in my mind of what does it really mean. Are there further bugs to be defined, or do we say this is just hosty? This is the way it is.
This is probably keeping the Clojure core team up all night tonight.
Oh yeah, it is the highest priority to figure this out, and there should be debates over beers over what should this mean. Yeah. And then Rich will come along and say it's this, and everyone will say like, oh yeah, that's right.
Oh man, this must have been 12 years ago now, but there was some debate, there was some kind of angst over in some so Clojure, when you return an int, it casts it to long.
Oh right? God, yeah.
Right, and so I
could see that leading to fights. Yeah.
Yeah, someone was like,
"How dare you cast it to long?"
They had a good point. They had a good point. It was like, there are some libraries, or some, let's say a class with two different methods, and if you pass it an int, it does int math, and if you pass it a long, it does long math. And if you are in interop and you're calling a method that returns an int, shouldn't it then and you pass that argument in to the other method, and now it's got a dispatch, like, which one do you call? Shouldn't it call the one that takes the int? And
there were like people on both sides of this argument, I guess.
No, it was I don't remember it being a real fight. I remember it being much more like it was so early that Rich could still just like say, okay, it's gonna change. This is what this is the new behavior. It was really early, 2008,
and he just kind of like he took a decision on it and settled it, and it went one way.
And he's like, this is just a type change, nothing more. Man, I want to, that was back in the IRC days. I want to go dig that up, see what because it was a good point. Like, it was like, this is making interop way harder, because you can't really control what methods get called. Anyway, this reminds me of that. Like, someone just has to put their foot down and say, this is what inst means. It's proleptic calendar. Everybody else just, it's over. Discussion.
I think the answer is probably there if you read the specs, but I just haven't read them enough to convince myself one way or the other. Yeah. And if it is proleptic Gregorian, if that's what the specs lead you to believe, then you have to conclude that there's a bug in Clojure, because it's not using that calendar.
So I see. Because the Eden spec does say it's ISO 8601. Is that?
I think so. I don't know for sure. I don't want to. That's where I get into the murkier area where I've only lightly read the specs. It's like it needs more rules lawyers to look at it and say like, yeah, it means this. So maybe all the rules lawyers.
It's either a bug because it doesn't perfectly do the spec, or the spec doesn't specify, and so we have to make a choice.
And it could be hosty, yeah.
Or it could be hosty.
Or it could be like closure scripts broken because it has to behave like closure, right?
Right.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what the answer to all this is.
Huh.
So it's to be determined, I guess.
Now, here's another thing. I know we're wrapping up, folks, but bringing up the tagged literals thing, I think it's a shame that Clojure does not come with a default type that represents an unknown tagged literal, right?
What
So
would
like
that
if you read in an registered tag, it throws an exception.
Oh, rather than just saying, here's the string, or here's the value that followed the tag literal.
Yeah, here's the symbol and here's the value, and
Mm-hmm.
just box them up together and hand them to you.
As like
Because you could print it out,
Mm-hmm.
you could print it out again, and then you could also read it back in again with that same one.
Yeah.
And even if it doesn't do that by default, maybe you could have a an option on read or read string that said to use that, because I've had to write that myself so many times.
Okay.
Because I wanted something that was like just like one level meta. Like I want to just I want to just be able to read in, because here's where it really makes sense, because the whole thing about Clojure data is that you don't have to understand it to be able to read it. Like if you don't understand that particular piece of data, but you don't need it, you should just pass it along.
Yeah.
Right. And so if someone is sending you Eden and you don't understand one of the tags, it should just work.
Yeah. It's that what you're saying is kind of the same theme of having a spec for maps where you have extra keys that happen to be in there. And
Right.
that spirit, you just say, let it through. Don't worry about it.
Just let it through.
If it's not in the spec, don't just let it pass through.
Just have some default reader that just boxes them up and knows how to print it back out, so that when you pass it along, it just works.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, maybe that clarity didn't exist back then when it was specified that way.
Yeah.
That'd be nice.
Yeah. Anyway, it's not hard to write a default reader, so it's possible. All right, folks. I think we're done. We got through all our topics. Don't forget, if you're at this point, you're probably watching on YouTube, and you can see this live by going on the Discord. Even if you don't see it live, you can chat and just be a part of this great community. I'm just scrolling through all the people who have Discord open, even if they're not in the chat room right now. There's a ton of people on this list that are just there. It's just, hanging out. You could message them and maybe they'll get a notification and start talking. So yes, please join up. Look in the show notes. All the links are there. We are also on Twitter. That's where we announce that we're going to go live. I mean, besides in the chat room itself. So come on, join up. Why aren't you already here? Anything more, Mike?
No, I think that's a good outro. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
See you later, everybody.
Pasta.